Zoom version. And you are in for a treat today. We've got an amazing lineup of presenters and who will be sharing their experience with the steps. They won't be giving a tutorial. They'll be sharing experience. And I'm sure that by the end of the day, those of you who stay with us through this journey, your spiritual condition will be greatly enhanced. And we won't be able to survive the certain trials and low spots if we don't enlarge and perfect. We will do some enlarging and perfecting so we can survive this spot we're in right now. I want to thank you. And finally, I want to let you know that the Woodstock West Conference is a conference that's in its 6th year. Next year, we will be here in Los Angeles, May 15th through May 17th at the 4 Point Sheraton Hotel. You can get information about the conference at woodstockwest.biz, B-I-Z. More information will be on the site. We've got a tentative lineup that's not there yet, but you can save the date, May 15th through 17th, 2021, here in Los Angeles. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over and get out of the way to our host and our voice, Candace.
All right, everyone. Thank you, Ralph. Candace Moore, alcoholic. So before we kick this morning off, you all will remain muted, but we're going to start with the Serenity Prayer. So if you will, in your private space so that we can get anchored, get ready to be open and receive, let's say the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, so this morning we're going to kick it off with step one. Nothing can happen without step one. Step one is are you ready? Do you want this, right? Are you done having it your way? Are you ready to do it someone else's way, and the trials and tribulations that bring us there? And, I have a reading here, but it's cut off, Ralph. So if you can send it to me again, we're going to just introduce my dear friend Steve. He's always excellent, depth and weight. I can't think of a better way to start this morning and our journey on what will be a staircase to freedom. Steve?
Good morning, everyone. Steve, the alcoholic. And Candace, thank you so much for hosting and being the voice. Ralph, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to be here. I've been spending the last few minutes scrolling from page to page, trying to find some friendly faces, someone I can count on to, because I've seen things on Zoom the last few weeks no man should ever see. And so who knows what we'll be exposed to during the course of the day. But I'm so thrilled to be here, and I do have a lot of friends that are on here. June, I've spotted you and Mark. I'm counting on you. Give me the high sign as we go along. And I've been given the privilege of talking about the first step, as Ralph said and as Candace said, as we begin the day to see these steps unfold in front of us. And it dawns on me that if I do my job effectively at around 9:55, you'll be in a hopeless state, utterly defeated by the alcoholism which has found its way into your life. And hopefully Polly will race to the podium, bringing the hope that's embodied in the second step, and the transformation that's encompassed in the rest of the steps as we go forward during the day. But I get to talk about, and really Ralph threw me off once he said this wasn't a tutorial. My whole approach to the morning has changed. I've had to put the PowerPoint away. I had a lot of academic things to share with you that I'm sure would have been enlightening. But one of the things I've discovered, and I know many of you have too, that while I will share my own experience around the first step, and I will share what I believe our literature suggests about it, I don't arrive here any particular authority other than my own experience. And so that's what I'll try to keep it to. my sobriety date, the last time I had a drink or a drug was June the 29th of 1989. I have made June the 30th of 1989 my sobriety date. I will tell you, I gave a tremendous amount of thought to that. I went to my sponsor at about 6 months sober, still very confused. And I said, I can't figure out this sobriety date. Is it the last day I had a drink or the first day I didn't have a drink? And Frank said, Steve, I'm just so impressed with the quality of questions that are keeping you up at night. He said, I am much less concerned. He said, just pick one. He said, because I am much less concerned with when you had your last drink than you not taking the next one. And that continues to be my focus today, looking forward rather than being trapped in the rearview mirror. But a look back is useful and helpful if I'm willing to allow it to be. When I had that drink on June the 29th, I didn't intend to go this long between drinks. I was not planning to stop drinking at that point. I did not consider myself alcoholic at that point. But here's something I did believe about me, and in A Vision for You, when Bill is talking about Bill's meeting with Bob and some of the conversations they had, it says this about Dr. Bob. It says that being painfully aware that he was somehow abnormal, he did not yet fully understand what it meant to be alcoholic. And that's what Bill brought to Bob. And I will tell you, I spent much of my life painfully aware that I was somehow abnormal. Yet I would not have been able to explain to you what that was. I spent a lot of time feeling different than other people, painfully aware of the difference. And if you had said, well, Steve, what is the difference? I'd have said, I don't know. I can't tell you how I feel. I just know it is clearly different than how you feel. And I couldn't have articulated my feelings, nor really the feelings I put on you. But it was a little bit like Bill writes in the 12 and 12 when he says that we're like actors in a play who've forgotten our lines. And that's the way I lived much of my life, as if someone that was in a play and did not know my lines and believing that everyone else had their script. They knew what they were supposed to be doing and saying, and I'm trying to improvise and not get caught, not knowing my lines, not let you discover that I don't understand my role and how I'm supposed to be living this life. And it's a really exhausting, tiring way to live. But I really want to focus. I want to share some of those things. I don't want to lapse into my story, which is usually what we say right before we lapse into our story. But I promise you not to get trapped in that today. But the alcoholism that I had, the reason that I had that drink the evening of June the 29th is I was scheduled into treatment on July the 1st. And I was scheduled because I had been convicted of my 6th DUI and a plea bargain agreement. And there's a whole lot more to my alcoholism, and I'll get to it as we talk about a few points during the course of the talk. But as the result of the plea bargain agreement, they cut some jail time off if I would go to residential drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And I did not yet know, I'd not heard all those words strung together at one time before. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. And the truth is, it still means different things to different people at different places. But it sounded slightly better than jail, so I was going to go. And when I walked into the treatment facility just outside of Nashville that morning of July the 1st, they gave me that they wanted to explore my relationship with alcohol. And by the way, when I went to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, that's one of the first things that you encouraged me to do, to take a look at my relationship to alcohol. You weren't telling me, now they, in that treatment environment, were asking me questions about my drinking. And then they were going to use my answers to those questions to help me see that clearly I was alcoholic. Now, in Alcoholics Anonymous, you did not do that. You shared with me what I hope to do this morning. You shared with me about your drinking, about your alcoholism in its completeness, in its more full form than just the relationship to alcohol. But it's important, I think, alcohol is not an unimportant component of Alcoholics Anonymous. You typically have some relationship to alcohol to have found yourself here. Our book says, I arrived here under the lash of alcohol. Now, it felt like that I had been sentenced by a judge, but looking back, I see more clearly that I arrived here under the lash of alcohol. But they asked me questions immediately that morning about my drinking. There was a whole host of admissions type questions, but they had 30 questions that many of you have seen versions of over the years. In AA, we have our own 12 questions and in a pamphlet. But it said, these questions all began with the phrase, have you ever? And they said, have you ever, by the way, means even one time and even with a really good reason. Have you ever drank in the morning? Have you ever drank alone? Have you ever had a blackout? Have you ever had a DUI? Have you ever had trouble at home because of drinking? Have you ever had trouble at work because of drinking? 30 have you ever questions that, as you know, just have check yes or check no to what I contend are clearly essay questions. These are questions that beg for an explanation. These are questions, and some of us knowingly laugh here this morning. But in truth, as I sat there that morning, I couldn't make myself check the box because I knew that somebody was going to make an assessment of me. We're going to draw conclusions about me based on me checking a yes or no box. And how can you do that without understanding the backstory? How can you do that without context? How can you do that without an appropriate explanation of the circumstances of that given day and that given moment? Now, I know now today just how easy I am to assess. But that particular morning, I could not make myself check the box. And part of the reason is because I think I know what they're asking me, right? I think when they ask me if I have ever drank in the morning, I got questions about the questions. I asked for clarity. What specifically do you mean morning? And it seemed a valid question because, in fact, I thought that they're asking me if I'm that guy that's got to wake up at 4 a.m. and grab a half pint off the nightstand and take a pull off of it to fight off the shakes and the sweats and just be able to get to the bathroom and perhaps ease into my day. And I've done that a few times, but not so often I'm going to check it on this test. But what if I asked if I'm out at 2 a.m. at a very nice establishment at last call, and is that morning drinking? And if I don't explain the difference to you, you'll think I'm half pint on the nightstand guy rather than cool guy out at the club guy. And to be clear, I was never a cool guy out at the club guy. But have you ever drank alone? Have you ever drank alone, Steve? They asked. And I said, well, yeah, but they left. We started together. Did you ever just look around and go, whoa, where did everybody go? It was a party just a little while ago. But again, to be honest, I think I know what they're asking. I think they're asking me if I'm that guy that's got to go home and close and lock the door and pull the shades and dim the lights. And it used to be, unplug the phone, and now it's just put it on silent. But and drink hiding from the world. And you can bet I did that a few times. But again, I could explain it, so I'm not going to check it on this test. But there's another kind of alone drinking that I had to do. I'm a guy that had to drink to go drinking. And I know that there's some people that had to drink to go drinking. Our book calls alcohol, one form it played for me was social lubricant, right? And I can just kind of visualize that. It's just like me oiling up and properly oiled, I can move easily amongst you. But without that social lubricant, I feel ill at ease. I feel herky-jerky. I feel like I'm bumping into everybody and everything. Now, the truth is, I don't look like that because, again, I'm acting like a guy would act if he were comfortable, if he were at ease, if he were confident, if he were personable, if he were gregarious, if he were the life of the party. I'm putting forth that front, but it is hard work and it feels uncomfortable. And I pour some alcohol on that, and that feeling diminishes. So is drinking to go drinking, though? I do have to ask, this is a well-informed crowd, is drinking to go drinking, is that actually drinking? Or is it like stretching before running? Is it really a preparatory activity rather than actually drinking? I view it as a warm-up activity, if you will. Now, here's what I'll tell you, and the thing I want to get to quickly. There were a host of other questions, and I answered them, and you may answer some of those questions one way, and I answered them another. The truth is that the men and women of Alcoholics Anonymous asked me to explore my relationship to alcohol this way. When I saw in our book on page 44, when it says, we hope in the preceding chapters we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you can't stop entirely, or if when drinking you have little control of the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. They even give me a little wiggle room there. I'm probably alcoholic. Now, can I, and that's what I had to ask, and that's part of this first step relationship to alcohol. Do I have, the first half of the first step explores my relationship to alcohol. I am powerless over alcohol. My life had become unmanageable. I've got to lay that describes the problem of alcoholism. And then I get the opportunity in Alcoholics Anonymous to determine if that's true about me, to determine if I identify with that. But I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous like Dr. Bob, painfully aware I am somehow different, but I was not yet fully acquainted with what it meant to be alcoholic. And I began, the way I got acquainted with my alcoholism was when you so freely shared about yours. Nobody in Alcoholics Anonymous spent any time trying to convince me I was alcoholic. I'm grateful for that. But people freely shared about their alcoholism, and sometimes it was about your escapades drinking. And isn't that a wonderful word our book uses? It calls them escapades. You know, I never got to come home to my wife, Connie, and say, don't be pissed off, baby. It was just an escapade. It almost sounds like ice-capades. It's really kind of an innocuous word that doesn't have much weight behind it. But I had various escapades. And so I am unacquainted with the alcoholism I have. And I began to read what happened for me in Alcoholics Anonymous as you gave voice to my alcoholism. And as I looked in our literature, I began to see something that is the moment I read it or the moment you said it, I would realize had been true about me forever, but a moment before I did not know. A moment before I may have even defended myself from the charges, but when I heard you share it about you or I read it, I recognized that's it. And that's been true forever. There are a few of those different things, because if I'm going to identify or examine my relationship with alcohol, if I'm going to concede what it means to be fully alcoholic, if I'm going to fully understand that, there's a few things that I've got to come to grips with that you said was true of you and of alcoholics that were described in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. One was I had to recognize that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. I didn't know that before I got to AA. When the doctor's opinion, when it says that the doctor's theory that we have an allergy interests us, it explains that for which I could not otherwise account. Whoa, that was the idea that I had an allergy to alcohol was life-changing information for me. I had no idea. That I responded differently than the non-alcoholic. And sometimes after being around here for a while, a guy like me will blow by that piece of information. Man, that's the linchpin upon which I connected with Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the linchpin, the understanding of what this book says, that I can never drink safely again alcohol in any form. I can drink anytime I want to. But if I'm alcoholic, the way Alcoholics Anonymous describes alcoholism, I can never drink safely again. It also tells me after any considerable time, I get worse, never better. That I have a progressive illness. And I'm hearing this information and then trying to find ways to lay it over the experience of my life and determine whether it's true of me. Over any considerable time, I get worse, never better. Now, I have heard some people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I challenge no one's personal experience, but I've heard some people say that their worst day sober was better than their best day drinking. Let me share with you, my best day drinking was a hell of a day. We had a really good time on my best day drinking. In fact, but my best day drinking happened years before I got sober. And I regularly looked back toward it with hope, with a dream that perhaps, as our book says, I could recapture the great moments of the past. I didn't think about it like that. It wasn't even that. I wasn't thinking that clearly. I wasn't sorting through it. But I know now from where I sit today that time and time again, I did what our book calls that I engaged in the experiment, the insane experiment of the first drink. And what happens when I first started drinking, it's like spinning a wheel. And on my wheel were a host of things. There was Get the Girl. There was, joyous intimacy with friends. There was colorful imagination. There was release from care, boredom, and worry. There was a feeling that life is good. All of these things are on my wheel, and I'm going to spin it and see where it lands. And also on the wheel early on was kind of, go on spring break and don't come back, and flunk out of school. But I'm willing to spin the wheel because about 90% of this wheel has some good stuff on it. But over time, somebody started messing with my wheel. And what began to happen is that the scales began to change, and pretty soon that wheel had some more severe consequences. And there were car wrecks and DUIs and betrayal of trust in my marriage, and drunk at the hospital when my daughter was born, and head-on collisions going the wrong way down the interstate, and stealing time and money from a family business. But somewhere on that wheel was still a couple of spots that said joyous intimacy with friends. And so hell, I'll play. Because here's the thing, I couldn't not spin the wheel. Even when the consequences continued to grow and get worse, what I couldn't do was not play. What I couldn't do was not drink. And so I've got to understand that over time I get worse, never better. I look at Bill's story as a wonderful example of the progression of alcoholism. Bill talks about early in his story when he was going to school, and he said he got too drunk to think or write. Now, that's pretty drunk, too drunk to think or write. And it bothered Lois a little bit. I mean, he's cool with it, but she was kind of pissed, and they're going to try to figure out how to navigate that. But then it goes on a little further, and it says that that his drinking was not yet continuous. It was not every day and every night. And then he talks about that liquor took an important and exhilarating role in his life. And I remember that period. And then I guess this is the worst thing that happened to Bill. He started playing golf. Apparently, if you play golf, it allows drinking every day and every night. Now, I don't know why that is. I'm a golfer, but Have you ever wondered why playing golf allows you to drink every day and every night? But that's what Bill said. And then Bill said, liquor ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. And then he said, gradually things got worse. And I look at that process, and I can lay my own life experience over this gradual worsening of my conditions and of the things that I did and the way I hurt people. And again, the betrayal of trust. When I look back, those of us who talk about our alcoholism regularly, and we tend to frame it around some real crash and burn moments in our lives. And boy, I had some, and I suspect most of the people on here have had some. But I will tell you that while there were those big moments, those big explosions, my life was really a pitiful, tawdry, day by day, nicking death by 1,000 paper cuts of hurting the people that I loved the most, and betraying trust and telling lies and trying to manage my life and not get caught and work this problem out. And it just felt like 1,000 plates were spinning, and I've got to try to keep them going. And again, just an exhausting way to live. So I've got this relationship with alcohol. Well, how do I know I have it? There's a few things that I know for sure. I know that the day that I did that plea bargain agreement, and nothing frightened me more than the prospect of going to jail. And they said if I was going to go do 60 days in jail, but they said if you get any other alcohol-related offense, you'll go to jail for a year. So I made a decision leaving the courthouse that I wasn't going to drink for the year of this probation. And I sometimes say I just parked too far away from the courthouse, because as I'm walking to my car, I began to think about this decision. And about halfway there, my plan took on a revision. I said, wait, that's an overcorrection. I said, I don't want to stop drinking altogether, but I'm going to be more careful. And you know what? Being more careful seems like a reasonable approach to the non-alcoholic. I'm not going to let that happen again. I spent a lot of time trying to not let that, whatever that was at a given time, I won't let that happen again. And so I'm just not going to drink when I'm driving. I'm not going to quit drinking altogether. I just won't drink and drive. Or I won't drive and drink. What I decided was whichever one of those I start first, I won't do the other. But then I kept walking. I wasn't to my car yet. And my new plan is I won't drink much when I drive. Now, I landed at my car. That's really about a 5-minute walk. And that didn't feel like lack of power. And that didn't feel insane. And that didn't feel like I was in a helpless, hopeless condition. It felt like linear thinking. I finally arrived. I thought through this. I used my best thinking. In my home group, we call that alkalogic. And I end up at my car and go, you know what? I'm just not going to drink much when I drive going forward. And I don't understand about the allergy to alcohol that prevents me from having that level of control. I am unpredictable. In 1980, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. I had been at a bar all afternoon drinking kamikaze shooters and taking Tylenols. I got on the interstate going east in the westbound lane. I hit a car head on, and 2 other cars hit us. And it sent some people to the hospital. I came to in the Cobb County Jail, and I urinated on myself and I vomited on myself, or I hope I did, because somebody did. And if you're in the drunk tank, I know I got some friends who've been there. Goal number 1 is to find a wall to back up against and stay upright if you can during the course of the night. But I woke up in that state, and I will tell you, though, quite earnestly that I had never been as afraid of the consequences that awaited me personally and professionally and legally. And I had never been as ashamed of what I'd done and the people I'd hurt. I didn't yet know the full extent of the injuries. It turned out not to be fatal. or even critical, but I got sued about that. But I was ashamed of what I had done. And I'd never been more humiliated the way I found myself in my own urine and my own vomit sitting around in this drunk tank. And I had never been more certain that I'll never drink again. I'm done. I am done. And 10 days later, I'm driving down the road, smoking a joint, drinking a bottle of wine, thinking I nearly overreacted to that. And again, that's not a laugh line. That's me telling you that's where I landed, that's where, and I don't know till I get to Alcoholics Anonymous when I read in our book that it says that there'll come a time that the alcoholic, the guy like me, won't be able to bring to consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. I'll be without defense against the drink. And I mean, that was, again, I look at that and it was just unbelievable that I go, I get that. That's me. That's me. I didn't forget that I had that car crash. I didn't forget that I had legal stuff in front of me. But I had alcoholic insanity that's described in the first step. I'll tell you the way I embrace the description of alcoholic insanity that I find in our book that feels most applicable to me. And it's right after Jim pours the whiskey in his milk, right? And it doesn't say pouring whiskey in his milk. That's not what they're saying is crazy. It's really poor taste, but it's not crazy. What they're saying is insane is that Jim knew that one more drink meant trip to the asylum, loss of his job, loss of his family. But he could not spin the wheel. He poured the whiskey in his milk, and then the book says this. It says, whatever the precise definition may be, what can this lack of proportion and the ability to think straight be called but insanity? What I realized looking back, I had a lack of proportion and the ability to think straight. I did not see that head-on collision 10 days later. It was not in proportion. It looked like a smaller problem than it was. It looked like something I would do better at. I could not see things as they really were. Some of the other things that are in our book that helped me figure out if I'm alcoholic when AA describes it, because I was trying not to be alcoholic. So one of the ways what you do when you're a guy trying not to be alcoholic, at least my approach when I was in treatment and they were taking us out to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, is I've decided to pay very close attention. I'm really going to zero in so I can determine for myself and then communicate to others why this is not my problem. And what happens if you happen to have alcoholism and begin to listen closely about alcoholism, there's a good chance that you will identify as I did, that you will hear the language of the heart. And the language of the heart to me isn't sweet, flowery language. It is language that resonates internally rather than academically. It's language that when you're speaking to me and I feel the experience you're talking about, I feel it because it resonates because that's me. And that's that connection, that irrevocable connection between alcoholics. That's why the singleness of purpose remains such a critical aspect of what we do. So that, as Dr. Bob said when Bill came to see him, he says, what you may ask was different about this man. Because Dr. Bob, being a doctor, had talked to doctors, had talked to psychiatrists, had been to the Oxford groups, had been prayed over, had done everything he could do. And he said, but this is the first man who spoke to me from actual experience. He spoke my language. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, you spoke my language. And it connected in a way that wasn't academic. The information was critical. The information's critical, but the information is not what caught me. What caught me was being with my people. What caught me was realizing, what caught me was being able to sit in a room and as you talked about yourself, learning about myself and being comforted by what I learned. It was not all good information. It wasn't all sweet, but boy, that's it. Because see, if I don't understand the problem, I can't address the solution. If I'm working on my transmission when my car's out of gas, it's not going to do any good. And you help me understand my problem. So now I've got this, I began to see that I've got alcoholism. I have the relationship to alcohol that you're describing. I don't seem to be able to stay stopped. And I was not always going to stay stopped forever, but there were long periods of time, multiple increments where I was going to stop for predetermined periods of time. I'm going to stop for a week, or I'm going to stop for a month, or I'm going to stop till she's not mad at me, or I'm going to stop until, the heat's off, or I'm going to stop till I don't have to be tested. I'm going to stop based on circumstances for a period of time, and I was hardly ever able to live up to even those limitations I set on myself. But again, it didn't feel like lack of power. You gave me this language, right? When I'm trying to figure out if I'm alcoholic, one of the things I look at is when Bill Wilson says that the characterization of alcoholics is in classification of alcoholics is in many ways outside the scope of our book. But that doesn't stop Bill from classifying a few. Just like us, we don't have to be experts on the topic to talk about it at length. And so Bill talked about some different types of alcoholics. We got some different types of people on this in this meeting today. I promise you, I can tell by looking at your respective rooms, and even your choice of virtual backgrounds tells a lot about you. And but he talks about the psychopath, right? And he talks about the manic depressive, about whom a whole chapter could be written. He talks about the person who thinks after not drinking for a while, thinks that he or she can drink with impunity. He even talks about the person who's like other people in every respect, except the effect that alcohol has upon them. And then he says all these and many others. So apparently there's even another broad array of personality types in AA. But regardless of our personality type, Bill says we have one thing in common: the phenomenon of craving that manifests in the allergy to alcohol, that sets me apart as a distinct entity. That's what's distinctive about the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic's relationship to alcohol. Apparently, if I don't have the allergy, I might not be alcoholic. Doesn't make me a bad person, but I might not be alcoholic, because it says that that's the single symptom that we all have in common. So when we say, as we tell new people all the time when they're describing their life circumstances, and we say you're not unique, and we say we're not unique, and we talk about people not being unique, we don't mean that that as individuals they're not unique. The good news is our alcoholism is not unique. That we all have the same alcoholism no matter what life circumstances you show up here around. And that's really good news, because it means we get to all meet in the same room. We don't have to break up into subgroups. The bald guys don't have to go down the hall, We get to all meet together because the 12 steps work for everybody independent of my external circumstances. And I will use those external circumstances to differentiate me from you. And that's what we mean when we talk about the anonymity of the 12th step and the anonymity of the 12th tradition. It means that I set aside who I think I am, and I set aside who I think you are when we walk in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we meet at the level of our alcoholism and nothing else. And when we meet at that level, then there's nothing unique about what we're doing. Age and gender and sex and race and religion and finances and education and all of those things are off the board. That is really good news for me. But if I've got this relationship with alcohol and I owned it, I finally said, I got this problem. And it wasn't necessarily, it was comforting to understand the problem, but it didn't solve the problem. Lack of power, and you gave me this language that I hadn't had. I had never once been out at a bar. And when I look back, I understand what was happening to me. But when I was in the middle of it, I didn't. I was never out of the bar, and after about 2 or 3 drinks, nudged the guy next to me and said, I don't know about you, pal, but that phenomenon of craving's kicking in on me. And, lack of power is my dilemma, I didn't know what was happening to me. But now I'm early in AA, and I'm learning about alcoholism in Alcoholics Anonymous while I try not to drink, while I am not drinking. And trust me, when I first get to AA, I was spending a lot of time not drinking. I thought all the time about not drinking. Actually, here's what my first year looked like. I spent probably the first 90 days thinking about not drinking. Then I spent about the next 6 months thinking about the fact that I don't drink. It's slightly different, but it's a little bit, I'm trying hard not to drink. Now I'm realizing I don't drink. And pretty soon I turned into a guy that just doesn't drink. And that happened when I wasn't paying attention. But if I've got this relationship to alcohol, I now have to get to what has been the most important and critical part of Alcoholics Anonymous in my relationship to the first step. And that is the unmanageability of my life. If I believe this is a personal perspective, so take it or leave it alone as you choose. But that first half of the first step is exclusive to alcoholics. That allergy to alcohol is limited to us. It is what sets us apart as a distinct entity. But the unmanageability aspect of the first step is part of over 200 other 12-step programs. The unmanageability is beset with my human problems. The unmanageability seems to be looking at my relationship with me, my relationship with you, and my relationship with God, and my inability to be satisfied and comforted in any of those relationships. That relationship seems to be, if I am like Dr. Bob, not yet fully acquainted with what it meant to be alcoholic, one of the things I have to then begin to look at is both the mental and spiritual components of my alcoholism. If I'm saying to you as I am this morning that I'm alcoholic, if I'm conceding to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic, here's some other things I'm conceding to. I'm conceding to the fact that that the main problem I have centers in the mind. I'm conceding to the fact that I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I usually don't think so. I'm conceding to the fact that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble. I'm conceding to the fact that where alcohol is concerned, I have a strange mental blank spot. I'm conceding to the fact that in the throes of my alcoholism, while I can see my drinking is injurious, I cannot differentiate the true from the false, and my alcoholic life seems the only normal one. I don't know about you guys. I look back today, I look back at my life, and I wonder, how could I have ever normalized that life? How could I have ever been in the middle of that and felt it was normal, but in the middle of it, it seemed the only normal one? I have to concede to the fact that as an alcoholic and not yet treated by the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, when you take alcohol away from me, I am probably going to suffer from restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness. And that state, left unabated, will make me long for the sense of ease and comfort that follows a few drinks. You know, when Bill was at that seminal moment of Alcoholics Anonymous, when he was standing in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel, and he could hear what was going on in the bar, and he was trying to figure out what to do next, and thought to himself that maybe he could go in there and have a ginger ale, strike up a conversation, and he used this word, get some relief. See, I don't want to get drunk. I want relief. I'm not drinking. He hoped for some relief. And thank God he made that call. He says he could hear the gay crowd inside. Further on in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, back in A Vision for You, it talks about how when they started those first meetings in people's homes, and it said that many a man has crossed the threshold attracted by the gay crowd inside, who understood his problems, who laughed at their problems and understood his. The gay crowd in Alcoholics Anonymous is what continues to attract me, as it did early on. But it took a while for me to recognize that, and it was a hard concept, and I think it is for a lot of us when we're new, and then maybe it reappears in a different way after we've been sober a long time. One of the things I have to remember is I have alcoholism even when I'm not drinking. The fact that I had alcoholism when I wasn't drinking never occurred to me before I got to AA. And so through that first 5, 6, 7 years, I was constantly aware of that. But gosh, after 30 years, I might think that now I can start navigating, I can begin to manage my life. My friend Bob B says that if I use the 12 steps without a reliance upon God, then I'm using the 12 steps as a management tool, not as a spiritual program of action. And I don't get the results I'm looking for. So this unmanageability, what does that look like on me? What I thought when I first got sober was unmanageability was all the chaos my alcoholism had constructed around me. That the legal problems, the money problems, the marriage problems, just my drunken behavior had created things that required a lot of cleanup, a long period of reconstruction ahead. I don't believe that's the unmanageability that we're talking about, or it's not the way that I apply it in my own recovery today. I see that unmanageability as the bedevilments and various manifestations of those bedevilments we find on page 52, where it talks about my inability to control my emotional nature, prey to misery, depression, can't be of real use to other people, bouts of fear, feeling of uselessness. Now, I wouldn't have used that language before I got to AA, but when I saw it, I recognized it fit me. I might have used a different label, and there are thousands of first cousins to that description, and I couldn't manage to be okay under any set of circumstances. When I tell you that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble, I begin to learn in Alcoholics Anonymous from a first step basis. What that means is that I cannot be self-satisfied. I have been trying to satisfy self one way or another, unknowingly, unconsciously, spiritually unawake, all of my life. I am spiritually asleep. That is my problem. I am spiritually disconnected from you and from God. That is my problem. I don't know it. And I cannot manage on my own will to overcome that problem. I can't read that problem away. I can't pray that problem away. Reading and praying are important components to the overall process of me being engaged in the 12 steps to support the problem that I cannot solve. I'm in a trap I cannot spring. Our book says that I am beyond human aid. I as an alcoholic, I put it on no one else, I as an alcoholic crossed over a threshold where I'm beyond human aid. That means not me and not you can fix this problem I have, but the God that's in you can touch the God that's in me and make this thing begin to heal. As Chamberlain used to say, there's that one problem from which all problems stem, that conscious separation from God and man. That's my problem, and I drink over that problem. I drink over that feeling to get relief. The relief that Bill was looking for in that hotel lobby. And the relief that he eventually found, rather than succumbing to the gay crowd and gay chatter inside and having a ginger ale that would turn into another debauch, that he made that series of phone calls that led him to a Henrietta Seiberling, that led him to Dr. Bob. And that conversation gave him relief. I don't understand the unmanageability is that I'm living a life that where I am unsatiated. I want to go back to my guy, the story, not of Jim, but later in that chapter of Fred. And I'm going to explain what Fred's, what his surrender to the first step looked like. and the results he got from it. And all of you are familiar with it, I know. But when Fred, like me, in fact, here's the description of Fred. I like to think it's me. Connie tells me that I may be overestimating who I think I am, but it says of Fred that he was well liked, that he was successful, that he was a good father. I'm going, yeah, man, me too. But it really says, I think it says he fancied himself, those things. And anyway, it says, but he ends up in this terrible alcoholic problem, and a couple of alcoholics come see him in the jitter joint while he's shaking it out, right? And they acquaint him, as I have tried to acquaint us this morning, with alcoholism, and particularly his relationship to alcohol. And he was genuinely grateful and genuinely optimistic that with this newfound information, he would go forward. And it said, in this frame of mind, he went on about his business. And we all laugh at the part of the book. It says, pretty soon we heard no more Fred for a while. Fred took that ill-fated walking back to dinner and thought a highball wouldn't be bad. And, pretty soon he's 3 days later in New York with a cab driver. Pretty soon the guys from AA come to visit with him again. Because when they left him after that first visit, the book says, and I quote, I decided to quit drinking altogether. To the untrained eye, that looks like the right response to alcoholism. I decided to quit drinking altogether. And after that debauch, they're visiting him again. And after talking to him on this occasion, he says, I decided to go through with the process. There's a huge difference in those two statements. And if I have been suffering from the alcoholism that I've tried to describe, what you'll hear the rest of the day is the process that I am surrendering to. Because when I hit that spot, when I'm in that helpless, hopeless condition, I got a problem I cannot solve, and a decision to do better, I cannot manage to do better. My life is not difficult to manage. My life is unmanageable. My sponsor says if my life were difficult to manage, the solution is to be a better manager. The solution is to take some management courses. The solution is to read up, but my life is unmanageable. So I put it down, I surrender it, and move toward this power greater than myself, which will solve my problem that Polly will begin talking with us about in a few minutes. When Fred decided to go through with the process, it says that my alcohol problem seemed to be relieved, as it proves to be. Then he says, quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. That means spiritual principles solve my unmanageability, or they certainly work with me on a daily basis. And Fred said that while my old way of life was by no means a bad one, the life I have today is infinitely more useful, more happy, and I believe more satisfying. That's actually the word is important, because it is better to be satisfied than to be happy. Is that his life is infinitely more satisfying and he believes useful than the life he had before. What I would share with you is that has been my experience, and I believe that my life is satisfying to the extent that it is useful. And Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a purpose. You've given me a usefulness, and it's simply sharing of my own experience. I leave you with this very depressing thought, because I think that's where we're supposed to be. After reading through the book, after reading those pages that are leading me up to that short description of alcoholism, I am left at the bottom of page 43, where it says, in bold letters, it says, once more. It's saying, Steve, dude, I've been telling you over and over in a whole variety of different ways. I've been trying to make this point to you about the first step, but once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the drink. That defense must come from a higher power. And if I arrive at a place where I believe that defense must come from a higher power, then I have nowhere to go but the second step of Alcoholics Anonymous. In that chapter, we agnostics, and I know Polly will be speaking to it, there's a line that I've really gravitated to, or a passage over the last few years. It says, our human resources, as marshaled by the will, failed utterly. It says, I'm not even pretty good at using my human resources. They are utterly useless in my hands. And if you work at a company someplace that has a human resources department, and you need a job done that you cannot do, you call human resources and ask them who on staff can come take care of this. If your computer breaks down, you check with human resources who reaches the IT department, and they send the person down who has the expertise to handle that particular problem. Well, in Alcoholics Anonymous, my human resources have failed utterly. I have to outsource. And in our case, I believe insource the solution to my problem and turn it over to a power greater than myself. And the steps you hear about the rest of this afternoon will be about how to remove those things that block me off from that power that is described in the second step, that is the solution to the problem I have in the first step. It's been fun for me to hang out with you guys this morning. Thanks, Ralph, so much for inviting me. Candace, thanks for hosting the meeting, and thank you guys for pretending to pay attention for an hour.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve. That was absolutely excellent. It's how we want to anchor our day. So everyone, welcome those of you who have joined us after Steve got started.